you hear me? It's lovely to see you all, and lots of familiar faces and a few new people. This series has been amazing as far as I'm concerned, not least because it was quite difficult to do, but the speakers have been outstanding and the subjects very varied, but I'm really impressed with the response. You know, it seems to me that there's a huge thirst and hunger for pursuing a path that we perhaps don't understand. It's gone, huh? Yeah. Where that's gone. Just try yours on. Hello? No, it's dead. We're going to have to really project our voices, aren't we? Are any of you on a loop? Would you like to come nearer the front? Yeah. Is that okay? That's working because it's just... Right, we're back on. We're back on flow. So I don't want to bite into this precious time anymore, but simply to say I am picking up very, very strong signals that we're a friend, really. This is the third time she's visited Giles. She's talked to us about Etty Hurson and Ellen Underhill, and done a short meditation with us as well on both occasions, didn't she? Which I think is going to be incorporated into the session today. But I think if you want to say any more about your links with WCCM, please do. Without any more wasting of time, I will hand over, thankfully, to Liz.
Well, it's always good to be in Oxford. I live in London. It's still good to be in Oxford. So thank you for inviting me back. The can you hear me question? Yes, good. I'd like to start doing something I don't normally do, but ask something of you. When Georgie said, "How are you?" when I came in, I had to admit that I was not very well, and I today realised why. So I don't feel at my bounds here. So I wonder if you would just give me a few moments of prayer and support in the silence. Amen. Thank you for that. Just shows we're all in it together. So, as Georgie said, I've spoken here before in the series on the mystics, and perhaps I said then, as I will say now, that my interest in the mystics is, for me, all about trying to understand what's going on because of my own journey of prayer, which has been centred on meditation for the last something like 25 years. So I come at it from a very, you might say, a practical starting point, that the way of meditation that I've personally been involved in has undoubtedly been a life-transforming, real experience of God, of Christ, of the Spirit of Christ within me, which has given me quite gradually a very different way of seeing life, seeing God, seeing creation, and of learning to live in it. So it's just a delight for me to be asked to talk specifically about that thing which for me really has been a pearl of great price. You will have realised in this series that there are many ways to meditate. But the tradition that I have been drawn into is one that we simply call Christian meditation, two words that have all sorts of interpretations, really. But the practice, which we will enter into maybe somewhere towards the middle of this session, is a very simple one. We allow ourselves to become still, to come to rest, and we take a word, a meditation word, a prayer word, and we simply repeat it over and over again inside ourselves, and we listen to the sound of it. That's all. And the particular teacher of meditation that, let's go back to the sort of 50s and 60s, when I think within Christianity there are a number of people given to us who were rediscovering the deeper wells of prayer that perhaps we'd lost. And one of those people was a Benedictine monk, John Main, who discovered it, or rediscovered it, and he recognised, although he was a monk, that because it was a simple way of prayer, it was one that anybody could take on. You don't need any particular knowledge, or you don't need a deep grasp of theology. You don't have to be intellectual, or it's just for anybody. Anyone who feels drawn to it can simply do that, and then begin to see what the fruit of that is in their life, and try and go with it. And when he realised that, people did come. They did come to learn, and the first meditation group started, where he would meet once a week with people. He would read a passage of scripture beforehand, and then he would give a 10-minute talk about meditation, springing out of that passage of scripture. They would meditate together for 20-25 minutes in the silence, and then there would be time for questions and reflections, a very simple pattern, which in fact is the model for all of the meditation groups meeting weekly all over the country and now over the world now. And what spread, he died in 1982, he was born in 1926, he died of cancer at 56 in 1982, and since that time the practice has spread, and the umbrella name for it all is the World Community for Christian Meditation. Quite a mouthful. But I've got some literature, some small books that you can buy at the end if you want to follow up, when there is indeed a meditation group meeting in Oxford. So that's the particular tradition that I have been shaped by, and we each have to find, our own way, but that's what I want to be clear that that's where I'm coming from. Not a new way of prayer within Christianity at all, simply a rediscovery of what's always been there, but from time to time has got lost. And in a sense, to tread the mystical path means leaving self behind. Words of Jesus. Cannot be a follower of mine unless you leave self behind. There's a necessity for a self-surrender. A self-surrender to the will of God, you might say. So that whose will are we following, our own or God's? There's some basic concepts that we have to find a way to make real. They're not just ideas. It's a call for us, and something that we can only do gradually. And in this way of meditation, you could say that we leave behind in that silence and in that giving our attention only to a word, which is a sort of sacrament of God for us, and we'll come to this in practice shortly, that we're leaving behind everything you could possibly put the word ours or my onto. My thoughts, my feelings, my ideas, my imagination. Because those are less than God. God is always beyond anything that we can imagine, conceive, think about, or feel. So this way of meditation is a way of really living into that very, I think, essential notion within Christianity. But more of that when we come to our time of practice together. One of the ways our Christian tradition describes this sort of prayer is as the prayer of the heart. I wonder what the word heart conjures up for you as I say it. Very frequently in our culture we tend to think of it as in opposition to mind or reason. Reason is the ordering thing, the thing we aspire to, maybe, and heart is often to do with the emotions. And we often perceive people as of more one sort than the other. And we often perceive ourselves as more of one sort than the other. Some people are more emotional, some people are more rational, and often there's a bit of suspicion between the one and the other. That's how human beings are, isn't it? But that's not really the fullness of the word within Christianity, and certainly in its biblical usage. If you think more in terms of when we use the language of the heart, we say, I'm going to do it wholeheartedly. I'm going to give my whole self to it. Or, that's the heart of it. Now I've got to the essence of it. Or, it's the heart of the matter. That's really what it's all about. It sort of encompasses it all and brings it to a point where we can say, And we often do say that when we arrive at the heart of the matter, don't we? It's almost a relief. Now I've got it. I've probably been wondering about it and musing about it and thinking about it, and now I've got it. But there's always that sense of completeness and wholeness about it. So the word heart is used all through the Bible. You know, God is going to replace our heart of stone with a heart of flesh. And the Spirit of Jesus, Paul says, dwells in our heart through faith. Dwells in our whole person. So this sense of the heart is the very essence of us. And the wholeness of us, a sort of unity, the unity of us. It's a symbol for that sense of unity. Because we often, I think, experience ourselves, and we talk about ourselves in fragmented ways. We talk about our will, we talk about our principles, we talk about our physicality, we talk about our emotions. So we talk about our reason, we talk about our desire. So we very readily distinguish them. They are distinguishable, but they are in essence all one. There's only me, there's only you. And if you begin to think about it, we often experience those different aspects of ourselves in disharmony. So it's not uncommon for someone to half recognise that their body is exhausted and showing every sign of exhaustion, yet the will is saying, I must carry on. You recognise that? Or to have your emotions are telling you something, but you're thinking it out and it doesn't. So usually at a half understood level, it's very common for us to experience a tussle between the different parts of us. You know, what we ought to do, what we want to do, will and desire, and for it to be quite difficult. And so when we actually do what we ought to do, what the will says, sometimes the desire not to do it is coming along with us, and we do it very grudgingly. We can't do it wholeheartedly. We say that we do it half-heartedly because the bit of us doesn't really want to do it. So that's a very, common experience of what it is to be human. So the prayer of the heart is a way of coming to God all in one piece, you might say. Opening the heart, the whole of us. Quite often, I should say straight away that this way of meditation doesn't replace anything else we do. other ways of prayer. But if you find yourself drawn to it, you will find that it affects, one way or another, your other ways of prayer and worship. But I do want to stress that. No, I've forgotten what it was I was going to say before I distracted myself. Let's catch it. So in some of our more familiar ways of prayer, sometimes we're thinking. Sometimes if you're someone who uses their body a lot in prayer, you're using your body in prayer. You may be imagining God. You may be thinking about other people in intercession. So quite often we're using a bit of different parts of us at different times to relate to God. So in this prayer of the heart, what we're doing, in a sense, is allowing all of those different parts of us to come together into silence, in a sort of unitive silence. As though at the heart of, you could think of it as a wheel, the wheel of our life sort of whizzing round, and at the centre of wheel is a point of complete stillness, as there is in the eye of a storm. It's what holds it all together. So we're almost bringing ourselves into that point of stillness, which draws us in from all of the activity that's going on around us, into this point of stillness, into the heart of ourself, into the centre of ourself, to meet with God, who is the heart of all. So it's a heart meeting heart, to switch the metaphor. And then we begin to see what happens. In our Christian tradition, the heart has its own language, and that language is silence. You could also think of it as the language of communion. We communicate with each other with words. But sometimes, maybe you've experienced it yourself, maybe you've seen it with other people, two people are so comfortable with each other that they can sit in silence. And it isn't a silence of separation because there's nothing to say, because there's distance, as it were, but there's no need for anything to be said, and we tend to call that communion, something that is beyond the necessity of words. Words have done their job, but we're moving closer than words can bring us. Those sorts of senses are at work in this prayer of the heart. There's also a little saying within the tradition that says the mind, the rational mind, is a good servant, but a bad master. The rational mind is a good servant, but a bad master. So another way that the tradition talks about this way of prayer is of standing before God with the mind in the heart. So it's putting the mind back where it belongs, in the heart, because the reasoning mind tends to dominate. So it's difficult for us to know when to use our rational mind to its full capacity and when not to. And I brought this flower, which is very rapidly, I'm afraid, dying from the garden, to demonstrate this, I hope. Here is a perfectly ordinary geranium, and I could come to it with my very marvellous rational faculty, whose special gifts are to analyse, to compare, to contrast, to group, to work out. And I might come to it and think, okay, a flower. It's got, I'll count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals. So that's a nice fact I have about the flower. And I could say, okay, let's have a look at them more carefully. I'll lay them out here. 1, 2, 3. This is a fairly simple flower. It's only got 5 petals. And I could take the other flower, but I don't want to, and I could have a look and say, okay, has that one got 5 petals as well? I could lay those out and see if they're the same shape. Now, they've got a sort of heart shape, oddly enough. I didn't realise that, and I didn't choose them because of that. And I can see that they've got veins in them, so I wonder what the veins are for. What do the veins do? And then I see there are these things which we call sepals. There seem to be 5 of those. Oops, 5 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Same number as there are petals. And then I can see underneath there are some other little things, I don't know what they're called, and a stigma and stamen, and I could continue to take it apart and to analyse it and then to compare it and say, are these petals all the same size or is there variation? And I would amass a lot of information which I could use in all sorts of ways, and that sort of approach, of course, has brought us huge advances. Because I don't feel too well at the moment, I'm going to go to the doctor. Because the doctor's, done a lot of training, is going to be able to analyse and say, right, Liz, what hope? This is the problem, and this is what I'll give you to fix it. Okay, so it's tremendous. We wouldn't have computers. That's what the reasoning mind is good for. But knowledge, factual knowledge, is not at all the same as wisdom. Do we have the wisdom to know what to do with our computers and our smartphones and our technology? That's clearly a very different matter, isn't it? So that reasoning mind on its own is not enough. And if we're not careful, it will dominate us. It's a bad master, but a good servant. It needs to serve us as whole people, as whole communities, as whole nations of full human beings. Otherwise, it may begin to dehumanize us. And the trouble with what I've just done is there is no flower anymore. If I came to it with the heart alive and awake, I could just look at it, be with it, enjoy it. I'd need some patience, really stay with it. And if I had time, I would discover that it began to reveal itself to me in a way I really hadn't imagined that a very ordinary geranium could do. And I might begin to feel that it isn't just an object of my attention, but I have a much closer relationship with it. And that's what the heart does. That's what the heart is for, you might say. To open up our sense of the wholeness of the other, of what in the other, what the other is bringing to us, a mutuality. Could call it love. So I'm going to put my already dying bits over there, the mind and the heart. So meditation as the prayer of the heart. So I think this is a good point to do it. So what we're going to do is very simple, but it's a good idea to start by preparing ourselves in our bodies, because we're going to bring the whole person into this exercise. So let's start with the body, because that's the easiest bit. I can do things with that quite deliberately. So the ideal way to sit for meditation is any sort of way that allows you to sit in both relaxed. Right, it's not a problem, it's fine, it just happened. You can pick the bits up afterwards. That is both relaxed and yet alert. If you're really coming into the presence of God, who is love, why would we not relax? But it would be a shame to miss it. It's a shame to fall asleep. It's that sort of idea. And although normally when we're most relaxed we're about to fall asleep, and when we're most alert we're about to leap into action, it turns out to be entirely possible for us to be both. So the general advice is you've only got the chair you've got at home, you can find something that suits you better. So find a way to sit in the chair where your spine can be upright but not stiff, because that helps the alertness and helps the breath to flow smoothly. And untangle anything, so untangle your legs, have your feet flat on the floor, and your hands in some way relaxed in your lap. And you can wriggle around if this doesn't feel quite right. So you might want to, for a moment, just have a sense perhaps that the upper part of your body, from the crown of your head, is just dropping down into the seat of the pew. So you're becoming grounded in the seat of the pew. You're coming to rest in the seat of the pew. You don't have to hold anything up. So maybe you'll have a sense that your brow is smoothing out, your jaw's relaxing, your shoulders are dropping down, any tightness in your tummy is beginning to undo itself. You may feel the weight of the heavy muscles in your thighs on the pew. Your lower legs simply dropping down from your knees. And feeling the touch of your feet on the floor. If it helps, be aware of your breath. Just bring your attention to your breath. You're not trying to alter it. You're just noticing what's happening all the time within you, your life breath, which goes on without your assistance, just happens. Sheer gift. You can bring your attention to it as it flows in and flows out. The breath flowing in, the breath flowing out. And it may be that simple giving your attention to the breath without trying to alter it, in fact, does allow it to smooth out, to drop a little deeper in your body, or to calm. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't. You're not trying to make something happen. So in a moment I'm going to say an opening prayer, and I'll sound the chimes 3 times. And as you hear the sound of the chimes die away into the silence, we begin our meditation, by which, in this tradition, you simply take a word, a prayer word, a meditation word, a mantra, and you repeat it over and over again inside yourself, and you give it your attention, your gentle but definite attention, in a similar way that we gave attention to the breath. So you need a word. You can choose any word that has a deep, sacred meaning for you. The word John Main recommends to us is Maranatha. Ma-ra-na-tha. Ma-ra-na-tha. The same vowel sound. Ma-ra-na-tha. It's in Aramaic, the language Jesus spoke. It appears at the end of 1 Corinthians. We know that it was used as a prayer word in the early church. It means, "Come, Lord." So we're offering it in a way as an invitation to Christ to come and be Lord within us. But when you're meditating, you're not thinking about the meaning of it. You're letting go of thought, you're letting go of everything that you could possibly put the word "my" onto. My thought, my feeling, my insight, my wisdom. Coming in to the silence of God. You're taking your attention off yourself, and giving it away, putting it in the direction of God, but not God in the sense that you can think of God or have concepts of God. It's a bit more radical than that. So you say your word, gently giving it your attention. What you'll discover is that your attention gets snatched away. All sorts of things it might be snatched away by. Maybe noises inside the church, noises outside, your own thoughts, your own feelings. But whenever you recognize that your attention has been snatched away by something else, then you have a choice. You can stay distracted, or you can come back to the word. So simply come back to listening to the sound of the word as you recite it inside yourself, and the sound of the chimes will bring the time of meditation to a close. So just gather the word you're going to use, Maranatha, or another word or short phrase if you've chosen another one. And we'll begin with an opening prayer. Heavenly Father, open our hearts to the silent presence of the Spirit of your Son. Lead us into that mysterious silence where your love is revealed to all who call. Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus. May the love we have received, Lord, sink deep into our hearts, bear fruit in our lives, and keep us in thanksgiving and in unity with all. Amen. And so as you gradually come back to the room, everyone in it, we meditated for about 12 minutes this time. The recommendation is that you meditate every day, twice a day, for maybe 20 minutes, 25. But that usually takes a while to arrive at, that commitment. Some people faster than others. But if you, from that taste of it, if it's new to you, or another taste, if you've tasted it before, you feel drawn to that way, then there are some books I can sell you. And Fiona here, do you want to stand up? Who can tell you about the Oxford meditation group? We'll do that afterwards, but because it's just so marvellous to have support along the way and to meditate with others as well as meditating on your own. So we'll have some questions at the end. Meditation is a way of the heart. And as one of the great Christian mystics, Eckhart, said, the journey to the heart is the longest journey a human being can make. So it's a journey that is a lifetime journey. But we are given the patience and the courage to tread it as and when we need it. And I'd like to finally give you a little picture. I can see that there are not going to be enough for everybody, so you may have to share. Very simple picture. Just look at this blobby picture. And I want to read to you a short piece from one of our great Christian men of prayer from the 6th century, Dorotheos of Gaza. So listen to what he says. The way of the heart, where are we going? What is it a way to? To God, to Christ, to love. Suppose we were to take a compass and insert the point and draw the outline of a circle. The centre point is the same distance from any point on the circumference. Let us suppose that this circle is the world, and that God himself is the centre. The straight lines drawn from the circumference to the centre are the lives of human beings. And the blobs are human beings on the lines. Let us assume, for the sake of analogy, that to move towards God, then, human beings move from the circumference along the various radii of the circle to the centre. But at the same time, the closer they are to God, the closer they become to one another. And the closer they are to one another, the closer they become to God. Does that remind you of 1 John 4? If you say you love God and you don't love your brother, there is no truth in you. So it's not really a moral teaching, it's just the way it is. So Dorotheos is saying, this is a picture of the journey towards God. To start with, we're out on the circumference, a long way from God, a long way from love. Therefore, there are a lot of things that get in the way of our loving our brother and sister. And those things are well described in the tradition, and we know them in our own experience. Things that get in the way of our relationships. You know, the everyday things, envy, anger, impatience, blah, blah, blah. All the things that we find so difficult in ourselves and in other people. Lots of blockages in the way. But if we're making this journey into the heart of God gradually, come closer to that source and goal of love, we, ipso facto, become closer to our brother and sister until all is one. So, a journey into love. It's the thing we most need. It's the thing we most want. It's our deepest longing, I think, of our heart. God is deeply attractive. It's a magnetic force once we begin to catch it. Yet we resist it. We sit to meditate, we think, well, this is simple. What happens? Our mind is all over the place. But we say, okay, with the help of others, that's the way it is. That's what it means to be me at the moment. It's a source of humility, but also maybe an encouragement that, you know, maybe if we make this journey into the heart of God, something could change. There's hope. Many people before have said so why not? When we meditate, we in a way try to align ourselves with this deep centre, this stillness at the heart of everything, to stay there as best we can. And every time we wander off, come back. We will wander off, but we can come back. We can keep on being faithful to the coming back. We can't stay there yet, but we can keep on coming back, and that's enough. And maybe we're encouraged because something changes. Maybe we have an experience of peace and we don't know where it's come from. Peace that passes understanding. Maybe the day goes better because we meditate in the morning. We don't know why, but it happens. Maybe we discover we're listening a little bit better to people, a bit less judgmental. Maybe someone says, oh, you're easier to live with than you used to be. Or as a friend of mine said, he'd been meditating for some time, and I said, you're still meditating? He lives in the States. He said, yeah, I am actually. I said, has it made any difference? He said, don't know really. Still meditating though. Then he said, my wife says I don't curse so much in the shower in the morning. That's a big change. You know, if you've spent years of your life getting out of bed feeling really miserable and slightly depressed, and gradually that lifts. So we're talking about something that works out in the everyday fabric of our life. That begins to change our life, that becomes real within us and has an effect on the way we are with other people. Perhaps we John Main says very often, loving God, the first step in loving God is allowing yourself to be loved. I.e., it doesn't start with us. Our self-centeredness thinks it all starts with us. It's not what our Christian gospel says. Loving others, he says, is the first step in loving others is allowing yourself to be loved. The first step in personhood is allowing yourself to be loved. So we sit there in the silence with our heart as open as we can, and we allow ourselves to be loved. And love always has to give itself away. So we discover we have a little bit more love for other people in those everyday ways, the fruits of the Spirit. You know them all, don't you? Love, joy, peace, kindness, and I'm going to forget the other four, but these everyday things. So, John Main says, you cannot judge your meditation by what happens during the time of meditation. You often think it was a failure and a waste of time. You can only judge it by whether it begins to make a difference to your everyday life, whether bit by bit you're becoming a bit more loving. A simple way, but not easy. So, just a couple of minutes for questions. Of any sort, practical or handy. I stunned you all into silence. Oops. That's it.
Nearly enough, Maureen.
You were talking about struggle with disharmony, the will being strong, and the different things that create disharmony. But you talk about coming to God, open the heart as a unity. And I wonder how you get rid of the disharmony. I mean, I suppose that's all.
Okay, yeah. So there's a question, if the heart is in disharmony, which I think you recognised, did you? Yes. How do you get rid of it? Well, in a sense, you don't. What you begin to realise the longer you meditate is that the more you try, the worse it goes. Because trying implies that you're putting your will back into it. Of course, we have a desire. We wouldn't start meditating, I think, unless there was something we wanted. And you may or may not know what you want to start with. Something just draws you. Sometimes people do know when they're struggling with anxiety or stress. I lead a meditation group in the city, in the financial city, and a lot of people come clearly because they're stressed. So we start from different places. Some people just know they want a deeper prayer life, or silence is calling them. So your goal is, in a sense, beyond our normal earthly desires, ultimately. So gradually you recognise that you are just doing the practice and things begin to change. And the more you will something to happen, harmony begins to happen in you simply because you're spending time in the centre. Does that make some sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I think that's what
But we're always getting tripped up by wanting to make something happen. But, you know, the Spirit blows where it wills, which is unfortunate for us because we want to do it. but then our part is cooperating with what's happening within us.
It's a surrendering.
Surrendering. Yeah. Which we learn to do gradually.
This does make a lot of sense.
Okay.
Because I've often thought the meditation, what next, but it is what happens after.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Yes, so the question was about surrender. So in a way, it is about surrender, and then what happens? Well, you don't know until you see. It's a way of experience, and we learn. Experience becomes our teacher.
I just remember something I read probably decades ago, I can't remember where, it goes like this: what is resisted persists.
That's something I really kept in my mind. I find that during meditation, if there is boredom or intrusive thoughts and so on, if I resist them, let persist, whereas if I say, all right, there you are,
Yes.
let resist them, they dissolve.
Yes.
That brings a level of
Yes. And I think what happens in meditation, you accept that you're distracted. It's just the way you are, but you don't have to stay there. You can come back. But if you fight it, and an internal dialogue starts where you say, oh, I'm no good at this, I ought to be better than that, then your distraction is just multiplied. And what happens in your prayer begins to happen in your life. You begin to see yourself more clearly as you are and to accept it, both the beauty of yourself and the grottiness of yourself, as it's revealed to you, and accept it. Well, this is it, I'm a human being, a flawed human being. But I'm going to accept that, and the only thing that's going to heal that is this continuing return to the love of God.
I think it was mentioned by somebody talking about mindfulness that, well, two things. One, it's quite helpful to remember a stream going by. Maybe you could say that was time, but the boats just keep going by. You don't get off the boat, you just let it go. And I think the other thing, also in the context of mindfulness, is minds. This is what minds do. They wander. That is quite normal. Just
accept it.
Yeah.
Accept it.
And ironically, in a way,
Yes. I mean, there are forms of meditation where the meditation is watching the thoughts go by. In this tradition, the focus is on listening to the sound of the word. So that's what you keep coming back to when you realise that your attention has been snatched away. There are many forms of meditation. So I think you have to decide discern which one you're called to and stick with it, otherwise you can get confused. But yeah, there are lots of lovely images. There's what do Desert Fathers say? Sometimes people feel they should be stopping their thoughts, and they said that you can no more stop with your thoughts than you can catch the wind. But what you can do is be more interested. You're just not interested in the distraction. You're not trying to stop them, you're not trying to do anything with them. You're trying to say, I'm not interested in you at the moment. I'm just interested in the Word, which is a sacrament almost of God for me. It's like walking down Oxford Street in all of that distraction. And you meet a friend you haven't seen for ages, and you're so involved in conversation. All of that, whatever else is going on in Oxford Street, you have no idea. You're just more interested in this. It's that sense. You can watch very right.
Yes, I think it is time. I know some people have to get back to work, etc. But thank you very much. This has been a marvellous session with you, and I hope you gained you people who come. You were going. I think I misunderstood what you said about Fiona.
Oh yes, Fiona, do you want to just say something about the Oxford group?
Thanks. We've got a little group close to us. Sorry.
Goes up.
At Theosophius. Well, I've been going there for a few years. I don't know how to say it. It's in Canterbury Road.